All right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I know we're kind of at the tail end here of the festival, so I hope you've been enjoying yourselves. I'm Ella Wahlestedt, so I'm subbing in for Nikki Steer-Justice today. She had to stay back in Massachusetts due to COVID concerns. So I work closely with her. I'm the Distribution Acquisitions Coordinator at Buffalo 8. We launched our distribution division about a year and a half ago. And I mean, at first we were just, an aggregator, but we've scaled up exponentially and have dozens of relationships now with various platforms on the streaming side and DVDs, physical, all that stuff. So I'll be getting into the nitty gritty throughout this presentation. And if at any point you have questions, feel free to just shoot up your hand and we can talk through it. We'll be talking about distribution. All right, here's a high-level overview of the various topics we'll be going through. We'll be starting out with distribution basics, then going into determining your market value for your project, the overall life cycle of your movie and what windowing is, and all the various media right types that we can exploit a film on, what it's like to work with a distributor, some recommendations and tips. The film festival circuit. If you're here, you probably know a little bit about that, but we'll be getting into more details there and then concluding with marketing. And then really the goal of this workshop is to equip you with the knowledge and tools so you can feel confident in navigating the distribution landscape. Distribution is incredibly opaque. They don't talk about it in film schools. They should talk about it in film schools way more. And it's constantly changing, right? It's really hard to find good information about distribution online. I've been in the boat too, and that's why I got interested in distribution, because it's such a tricky space. It's always changing. It's exciting. It's incredibly exciting, but it can be hard to break into sometimes. So hopefully this will be insightful and you can walk away with some skills and be more confident in your negotiations and whatnot. Some distribution basics. So the distribution landscape is changing incredibly fast. I'm sure you all know this. We've seen it really in the last 5 to 10 years with the advent of streamers. Netflix, Hulu, all of these streamers have completely disrupted the way that consumers are purchasing and viewing content. And it's affected the way that the monetization happens of content. It all starts with your target market. I'll be talking a lot about target market in this deck, and so really the heart of it is the core question is: can you identify your target market? Are they clearly craving and supporting content like this? And that's going to indicate is there a market out there that will pay for your film. Another thing is just most films do not recoup their budgets. And this really comes down to a variety of factors, but one of them being, a lot of filmmakers, when they're in pre-production, when they're in development, they're not really thinking about the various distribution routes. Really, you're thinking about, I want to get this movie made, and power to you. But also, it comes down to, can you find that target audience? Is this something that the market wants? Is this something that people want, people will pay for, right? Or that not even people, consumers, but also streamers and platforms themselves, they're looking for content like this, like the buyers in the market, right? So one recommendation is consider keeping your budgets lean. One example, we had a film that was made on a very lean budget. It was made with $50K. The filmmaker pulled in some favors, brought in like a B-list actor, Camila Mendez, and it made $150K. So obviously it did really well, was able to recoup the budget and then some. But if that film had been made for $500K, you'd still be in the red, right? So you have to kind of make sense of the economics of it and try to keep budgets lean as much as you can. There's kind of two spaces you can play in. There's obviously like the sub $1 million budget, and you're really doing the indie kind of entrepreneurial filmmaking there. And then there's the $3+ million, and that's when you're kind of bringing in the A-listers and whatnot, and probably bringing in a debt financer and trying to get distribution at the development and pre-production phase. So in our conversation today, we'll mostly be talking about what it's like to get distribution at the tail end, right? Once your film is complete, you're maybe at a festival, what's next, right? It's a whole separate conversation if we wanted to get into, I'm a distributor and I'm looking at projects in development that I want to put up a backstop, or I want to put up an MG and bank on the film, being successful and having it and getting the rights to it once it's fully complete. We're just going to be talking about acquiring completed films. So back to this, know your distribution routes and how does this film fit into your larger career arc. Sometimes your goal is not to recoup your budget. Sometimes you have to step back and think about it, right? If you're making your first film, maybe the goal isn't to necessarily recoup your budget, so it'd be nice to for your investors, right? But how does this fit in my overall career arc? Is this one of many? Is this building on my track record? So the goals for your film are completely different. And then the last thing is successful films have engaged filmmaking teams. We've seen that with our most successful films that we've distributed. They have really, really active filmmaking teams. They know their audience really well. They have contacts. They have built these lists of organizations that they worked with. They have crowdfunders who are eagerly waiting for the film, right? And they know how to market their film, right? So right here, be the major force in marketing. Really, no one knows your film like you do. And so even when a distributor acquires your film, there's a kind of educational process that happens of teaching your distributor how to market your film, right? You know your audience best. You know your film best. All right, so we'll be getting into determining market value of your project. Really, just repeating this, emphasizing this point, lead with distribution. When you're leading with distribution, it causes you to think about the end goal. And causes you to think about the market value. So the market value is a major factor in determining a project's budget and eventual distribution pathways. So sometimes filmmakers will make the project and then be completed with it and say, okay, what's next? How do I make money? Where do I put this? If you're thinking about distribution at the very beginning, you'll be able to, throughout the production process, build that social media following, get people excited, really, really build up those contact lists and be able to have a clear path to distribution once the film is completed. So here's some questions we can consider here's some questions that we consider when we are determining a project's market value. These are factors that get us really excited as distributors when we see a project. So did it play in any festivals, right? And also, not only did it play in any festivals, but did it do well in festivals? Did it play at larger festivals? And did it win any festival awards? Oh, thank you. We're fixing the clicker. Is it consistently praised by critics and fans alike? Was there notable press or features around the title?
Just wave your hand.
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead and move it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Just wave your hand.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Who's in the movie? What do they? When do they appear? And do they have a large social media following? Past awards? Who's the cast? Right? Do we know them? Do they have a large social media following? That's something we get really excited about when maybe they're not super recognizable, but the filmmaker can point to their social media and say, hey, they have 3 million followers. That gets us really excited because we know that there's a built-in audience in a way that the talent can promote the film to and drive people to watch the film. Is there anything special or exciting about the marketing campaign for this film? Are there any brand partners on board? Any notable producers? What is the key selling point? Is there a satisfying twist that pays off for viewers? And who is the target audience? Can we clearly identify that they're craving and supporting content like this? And lastly, is the audience underserved? Are they willing to support content, this type of content? So identifying your target audience, some questions you can consider in doing this, and this really plays a large role in just in your overall project's market value, is who is the primary audience interested in this film or series, and how do you know? Right? You want to test your assumptions. You don't want to just jump to conclusions and say, okay, this is my target audience. You really want to talk to your target audience. Okay, what else? How will you reach them? Do you know what platforms they're on, right? Do you have direct channels to them? Do you have direct communications to them? Where do they watch stuff? What platforms, right? Certain types of people congregate to certain platforms. It's really interesting to see, like, on the back end of what's performing well, what kind of content is performing well on which platforms. Like, for example, on Tubi, we found that that films with primarily black casts do so well on Tubi, right? It's the audience lives on Tubi. Who do they follow? Do you already have access to them? And then one way to help identify your target audience, you can identify comparable projects. I know we talked a little bit about this in our pitching workshop yesterday, is film comparables, right? So one tip is you can look at comment sections of comparable films to see who's engaging, what are they saying, and then also, can you target a similar type of audience? And also, you can look to them if they did a specific marketing campaign that was really good, you can, kind of mimic that in your marketing campaign. And then you also want to try testing the concept of the film on individuals who would make up your core audience, preferably before you make the movie. I think a lot of screenwriting tips, recommend you going up to people in the grocery store and asking and telling them your log line and seeing if they're interested, right? That's a great way to identify your target market and who may be interested. So I used to be in the entrepreneurship space before, and one of the top startup accelerators is called Y Combinator. And their motto is make something people want. It's pretty straightforward, but it makes sense, right? You want to make sure that you're creating content, right, that people are craving. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just told by a distributor recently that with putting stuff on IMDb, they say as little as you put for pre-production will help more with a sale. What do you think on that?
In the pre-production?
Like in pre-production, because they say if you put too much on it and it shows it's complete and stuff,
yeah,
bargaining power for selling it, they can sell it for a lot more if there's not.
Yeah, definitely don't put your budget or anything. Don't tell people your budget. Try to keep that under wraps. You also, one thing distributors and sales agents will look at, I think I mentioned this in one of my later slides, is when it was released too, or when it was made, right? If it feels more outdated, after a year, it really lowers in sales value. So you want to make sure that it's up to date. Sometimes we'll just, if we're doing a re-release, we might just change the date on it to make it feel more fresh, especially when we're pitching to international sales agents. Yeah. Great. We'll be going into life of a movie and windowing. And just for clarification, windowing is the time period in which a film can be exploited via a certain media right. All right, this is complicated. I know. It's a lot to digest here. And this is really how a traditional movie is distributed, right? And this is constantly changing. The pandemic has completely disrupted the way we're distributing films. So there are really no rules. This is created by David Spiegelman. He's an exec at STX Entertainment, so I wanted to give him credit. But I mean, at first, if you look over here, you'll see that there's that initial theatrical window. PVOD, premium video on demand, became really popular during the pandemic. We first saw it with Trolls World Tour, did really well. That will have a window of anywhere from 17 to 90 days. Then it'll go into really the TVOD window. Everything is defined down here, and I can talk through it as well. TVOD is transactional video on demand. That That's when you're purchasing or renting movies via the internet. So whenever you purchase a movie on Amazon for like $3.99, right? That's TVOD. Then it goes into electronic sell-through. It's purchasing. TVOD is renting. SVOD, you'll have your SVOD window, pay one window where you can license your film to a streamer like Netflix. That'll happen typically then. Some streamers obviously want it exclusive upfront. You know, they want to be the person that that has first access to it, where consumers are driven initially to the streamer. Like we just closed one with Tubi, where they wanted the exclusive Tubi originals labeling, right? So they got the first window. So this changes a lot, right? There are no rules. This is some things go before others. Some of this is taken out, right? You can take a picture and reference this. It's really helpful with the definitions, especially. You'll see these terms a lot in distribution. A little bit more about theatrical. So you have your wide theatrical release. This is when films are playing at the same time at cinemas in most markets across the country, right? The Maze Runner is an example. It'll be in AMC's, Regal, all of those. Limited is about 500 screens or less, and it's usually in art houses, right? We'll sometimes do that for a few of our films. And it's usually in smaller markets. And then four-walling. So this is when a studio or distributor rents a movie theater for a period of time, and they'll pay an upfront fee to do this, and then they receive 100% of gross proceeds. Just go back for a second. And then, I mean, one thing I like to mention too is if you want to have a theatrical release, right, and you want to have the premiere or have it go in a couple theaters, one tip as an independent filmmaker is you can four-wall it, right? You can pay a theater an upfront fee in order to have it. And I mean, you would just have to call theaters, right? Or you'd hire a booker to do it who has those connections. You may even, I have seen a few times where filmmakers can negotiate, if they don't want to pay the upfront fee, they can negotiate better terms for the theater, like a 75-25% split, as opposed to the regular 60-40 that studios take. I think that's it. Yeah.
With that, would you think of a fourth wall premiere prior to filming, so you incorporate those costs into the budget?
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good question. Yeah, you'll definitely want to set aside some of your budget to P&A expenses, right? And that would be in there. That really ranges a lot. I've heard a general rule of thumb like 30%, as much as 30%. But yeah, that would be included in your marketing costs. There's a couple other costs I'll mention that that you'll also want to incorporate into your budget, like E&O insurance, and deliverables, any cost for deliverables, right? I saw a hand.
And you would largely be responsible for marketing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you could talk to the theater. I'm sure they usually have like a newsletter, right? And you could talk to them about printing out posters. You would probably handle the cost of printing out the posters, shipping it to them, telling them how to market it. I've seen some also do event-like screenings, and that has worked really well, right? Where you kind of orchestrate a whole special event around it. There's this really good example called Bite Me. I think it was on Film Collaborative, and this filmmaker traveled the country doing exactly that, four-walling theaters, calling up theaters, and doing an event-like screening. It was a romance about vampires, but it was a comedy, right? And she encouraged everybody to come in like cloaks, like with vampire things, right? Like vampire teeth, and they would give it out in the screening. So it became this like really nice community feel that would get people excited and talk to other people about the film. And so what I generally say, I'll mention this later too, is theatrical is largely a loss leader. You know, you're not going to make a lot of money with theatrical unless you do that, you know, wide release or limited release, but it can be a really effective marketing tool.
So I had experience in AMC as well Cinemark.
Mm-hmm.
I have better experience with Cinemark getting the revenues. So do you work with any particular chain?
Yeah, we work with AMC, and then we have a couple bookers we've worked with too, who have direct relationships. And so, I mean, that's also another tip: hire a booker, right? That has those direct connections with the theaters and can negotiate on your behalf. No, you're good. So this is a breakdown of the various VODs. So you have, like I mentioned, transactional video on demand. This is a little bit outdated, right? But it still holds true that iTunes, Amazon, Vimeo, YouTube, Google Play, those are all transactional. So you're paying, a set price to rent it or to buy it. SVOD, these are your Netflixes. HBO Go is no longer existing, but HBO Max, right? Hulu to some extent, even though that's kind of like has an AVOD twist to it. AVOD is advertising video on demand. This is platforms that are making money through ads. So they'll put ads every 15 to 20 minutes in the content, and they'll be making money from that and be doing a rev share with the filmmaker or the distributor like us. And these are Crackle, Tubi, Pluto, Roku. This is really outdated, but just Tubi, Roku, Vudu. Those are the main ones. Facebook Watch at some point had AVOD going. And then you have some that are kind of a hybrid of all of these, right? Like Peacock is a great hybrid, right? They have the AVOD tier where you can watch it for free, but then you can pay a little bit more and it'll put you into the SVOD category. All right, working with the distributor. So how do distributors make money? So there's multiple revenue streams that they'll want to exploit. One is theatrical distribution. This is through theaters, limited theatrical, what we just talked about. So like I mentioned, it's typically a loss leader, but it has the opportunity of being a really good opportunity to generate press and marketing and word of mouth. And also some cable providers like In Demand will only want to distribute and pick up your film if it has a theatrical in those top DMAs, right? Like New York, LA, Chicago. Another thing that distributors can do is set up licensing deals with platforms. So we have a Rolodex of platforms that we're regularly talking to, checking in with them, asking, okay, what are you looking for right now? Is it genre content, big cast? Are you in the mood for XYZ, right? So something you'll want to ask a distributor if you're working with them is, who are your SVOD partners? What are the streamers you're talking to? Is a licensing deal right for my movie? Is that something that we could do, right? I'll also mention that because streamers like Netflix are increasingly creating original content, we've seen, Netflix originals skyrocket. They're acquiring fewer and fewer truly like original, truly independent films. So the acquisitions offers are decreasing. The number of them are decreasing, and also the licensing, what's it called? The licensing amount is also decreasing. But it's still a great revenue source. We just closed one deal with, we're closing one right now with Showtime for 3 of them, and we just wrapped up one with Tubi for 5, right? That's also a really nice thing if you're working with a distributor, is if they have those relationships and it can sell them in bulk. Sometimes these streaming partners don't want to have to deal with one-off acquisitions unless it's really enticing, but we'll pitch them a slate of projects and say, okay, you can have all of these, right? Okay, here's 3 more revenue sources. So DVD and Blu-ray, it's really better suited for genre films. We've seen it work really well for, action, horror, sci-fi, thriller. And then something you'll also want to consider if you have a horror film is VHS does really well. It's seen as a collectible, gets people really excited. Non-theatrical distribution, so this is through libraries, colleges, cruise ships, airlines, prisons, community screenings, hotels. There's a lot to work with here. And we have certain partners that we work with in order to exploit it via those channels. And then foreign sales, right? So if there's no international sales agent already on board and a distributor acquires it, like us worldwide, a lot of our filmmakers just want us to handle worldwide rights. Then we'll take it and we work with international sales agents to shop it, to give it to them to shop to different buyers around the world. But one thing I will mention about this is foreign is super picky, so it's best suited for, again, genre films. Films that have a notable cast and can easily transcend beyond language barriers. So there's kind of a spectrum of the types of distribution and distributors. So on one hand, over here, you have self-distribution and aggregators. This is really if you're handling it yourself or you're using an aggregator like online, like Bitmax or FilmHub, right? And some of the pros of this is you're retaining 80 to 100% of distribution revenue. And so you have nearly full control over every step of the process, right? You can still do community screenings, you can do theatrical, all that is still in play, right? Because this is only really VOD, where you're putting it up online. Some of the cons on this is there's no guidance on distribution and marketing. You're leaving money on the table, right? Because you're not doing maybe DVDs, or you're not doing non-theatrical, or you're not being positioned or pitched to streamers for licensing deals. You'll have to cover all delivery costs and all marketing costs yourself. And like I said, there's limited or no access to non-theatrical SVOD and theatrical partners. You can find a booker maybe and still do theatrical or floor wall if you wanted to. So that's still an option, but usually distributors will have the bookers they like and work with and know well. So on the other end, you have boutique distributors. So the pros of this is often they will pay what is called a minimum guarantee, an upfront fee to be able to purchase all of the rights of your film and distribute it. And so typically they'll do a theatrical release. They'll give you a lot of one-on-one attention. Usually they'll release a lower number of films, around like 12 films per year, versus aggregators, they'll pretty much take anything. They have hundreds of films they're working with. Some boutique distributors will be more volume-based too. So I've seen some distributors acquire 300 films a year, which is a lot, right? And then also with boutique distributors, they'll put up more P&A support. There's a certain prestige with the titles they're acquiring because they're acquiring fewer and they're willing to put up that P&A spend. Some of the cons of it, though, for a certain number of distributors is that they're overspending on P&A and they'll be hiding profits and distribution expenses. So Hollywood accounting is a very real thing. They'll kind of, if they go to a meeting and they'll maybe talk about your film, that will be added to your statements, right? So that's a sneaky tactic that some distributors will use in order to retain more of the film. So that's something to look for. I'll get into that a little bit later. And then filmmakers rarely see any money beyond the MG. So that's one of the things we were always going back and forth with when we started the division is a lot of filmmakers want an MG, but sometimes you have to be on the lookout just because sometimes an MG might be the only money you may see on your film because the distributor is not incentivized to make back more, right? So, and then there'll be higher distribution fees and longer terms. So we see, can you go back for a second? So we see ourselves kind of in the middle of this, more towards the boutique distributor. We try to keep P&A really, really low and be strategic about our spend. We do a little bit of influencer marketing. We'll obviously have to pay for delivery costs and whatnot, but we're really trying to be super filmmaker friendly. We're not putting up an MG. We want to be in it together with filmmakers in order to make their money back for both of us. Yeah.
Typically, what kind of money are you talking about when you say minimum guarantee?
For acquisitions, because it looks different, right? When you're in the development phase, sometimes they'll put up what is it, like a couple million, right? But when you're looking at completed films, I've usually seen it can range. I've seen it for like as low as 5,000 to
What?
as low as 5,000
Yeah.
to, I mean, right, it's really limitless, but usually I see it for independent films, 5,000 to 30,000. Yeah.
If streamers never share their data, how can you ever monetize or think you're going to make money after the MG?
Yeah. I was literally talking about this last night. No, it's a common frustration, right? A lot of talent agencies don't even know how to negotiate higher prices or higher fees for their talent because they cannot see the streaming data. It's proprietary. They don't release it. So that's something to consider when you're doing a licensing deal with, say, Netflix. They won't give you the data of how many people are watching it, right? And I mean, it's not a revenue share, right? It's that upfront fee, right? So you see what you see at the very beginning. With the revenue share model, right, like on Tubi or Apple or whatnot, you'll be able to see how many impressions you get. It's a common frustration. I get you. I wish we had more data, honestly. It's not like theatrical, right? Like before, when we just had theatrical was kind of the first release, we could see the data. We can look at the box office numbers weekend one, right? But now we don't have access to any of that, really. So wondering where the space will go in terms of more transparency with data, but we just haven't seen that yet. Yeah.
And how do you find comps? Kind of the same.
Yeah. No, we were talking about this yesterday too. But comps, I mean, so there's multiple types of comps. There's the thematic comps. There's the tonal comps. Those are there similar themes, thematic comps, similar aesthetics and feel, tonal comps, and then you have financial comps, right? And I think that's what you're alluding to. It's really hard. There's not a lot of data online, so you really have to pick up the phone or email people with similar films as yours, or have distributed via certain or worked with certain distributors to understand how their financial what their statements look like, how much they were able to recoup. Yeah.
Are they free to, do you find that they're free to give that info?
Sometimes, it depends. Yeah. Doesn't hurt to reach out. I mean, filmmakers like to help filmmakers, right? Especially indie filmmakers, it's hard. Alrighty. And so here's some general recommendations when working with distributors. So you'll want to release your film within 1 year of its first festival play. Foreign markets, like I mentioned, see content as outdated if the release is on IMDb is over a year ago. Do your due diligence when identifying distributors you want to work with. Talk to other, this might be my next one. Yep. Do they align with your goals for the film? Are they more, especially if maybe it's like a cause-based film, a cause-based documentary. Your goal may not be to make the most money. Your goal may be to have the most impact. Is that distributor willing to do community screenings, maybe with a guide of a set of questions, right? That might be an interesting way to really maximize impact, right? Is that something that they're willing to do and spend the time on? One thing we do for some of our films really is we'll partner with a nonprofit during the time of release and encourage them to post and donate $1 pre-sales to them. And so it helps them, it helps their cause. The nonprofit has to align, of course, with the film and what the film is saying in the message, right? But that's one way to also maximize impact if that's your goal. Have they released similar content, similar genres, right? And you can talk to filmmakers that they worked with. You can similarly call them up. IMDb Pro is a really great tool if you're trying to find filmmaker direct emails, right? Talk to filmmakers that have worked with that distributor. Were they easy to communicate with? Did they lead you throughout the delivery process? What were you able to see a return, right? How much money? Where did they exploit it? Talk to other filmmakers that have worked with them. And don't be afraid to ask questions and negotiate with your filmmaker, right? There's a lot of wiggle room, right, with some of these. Make sure that that you're vouching for yourself and getting terms that you're comfortable with, right? You can always go do self-distribution, right? You want to make sure that if you're entering into a distribution deal, you're happy with that distribution deal. Beware of sneaky distributors' tactics. So some of them is creating these miscellaneous expenses, hiding profits in P&A. So one tip is just always put a cap on their P&A spend in the contract, so that they can't spend any more beyond a certain number that you feel comfortable without your written consent. 15 to 20-year terms. We've seen this for a couple distributors. Obviously, they're retaining the rights to your film for a long time, and you won't be able to get that back. So 15 to 20 years is generally a red flag. And cross-collateralization, when you're offsetting costs, all costs with revenue from few performing titles, kind of borrowing from the winners to pay off for the losers. And then also don't avail your film anywhere before, like on Amazon, Prime, bless you, Vimeo, YouTube. We see that for a couple of our filmmakers. I just threw it up on Amazon Prime and Amazon Prime is only paying a cent per view, right, or per hour. It's really, really low. It's not, we don't use Amazon Prime anymore just because it's so low. It works a little bit for international since they're paying a little bit more, but we don't love when filmmakers have already availed it somewhere else, because then that's taken money off the table. We want to be the first ones to release it. We want to have that pre-order on Apple, have that super punchy release. And so if it's already been online somewhere on YouTube, you know, that kind of hurts the potential of it generating a lot of money. And then build this into your budget. So marketing, you know, any festival submissions and deliverables budget into your production budget. When you're working with the distributor, they'll give you a delivery schedule. There's a couple legal things on there, like we'll ask for title reports, we'll ask for E&O insurance, so sometimes that can rack up a couple thousand. E&O insurance is great to have just in case someone comes out of the woodwork to sue you. You want to make sure that you're protected legally, right? And then also bring on a sales agent to represent you, negotiate on your behalf, and sell individual territories, right? They could introduce you to distributors across the world and to buyers. All right. Any questions about that? Yeah.
So if 15 years was a red flag for a term, what's a boilerplate term for a years?
So I've seen for some aggregators it be like 2 years, 3 years, right? But that's via aggregators. We typically do anywhere from 5 to 10 years personally. That's a number we feel comfortable with. So it can be really anywhere from 2 years to, we've seen like 25 plus years, right? Where they're just owning it in perpetuity. It's interesting. Yeah. All right, let's hop into film festivals. Oh yeah.
I know you just kind of mentioned to kind of do the festival circuit initially as a recommendation. But is it good to sort of build a buzz around festivals, or have a movie completed and go right to a distributor instead? Like, let's say you're not getting into any major festivals, likely if it's like a film or something.
Yeah, I mean with action, right, you're not trying to do a festival circuit, right? It doesn't really make sense unless you're doing genre festivals, right? There's a few. Right, exactly. There's a lot of horror festivals. So if you have a horror film, you definitely want to take advantage of those horror films, just because you'll find your niche or target market there, and press like Film Threat, who's going to be there, right, and can potentially generate good press for your horror film. For dramas, it makes a lot of sense, film festivals, but for some genre films, like we have several genre films where they didn't have any festival play whatsoever. But it's okay because it's a genre film. We can make money on it. It doesn't have to break out in the festival circuit. Yeah, it really depends on the film. So some of the benefits of a film festival. So yeah, just gaining attention, acquisitions offers from distributors. Acquisitions execs and distributors will be present at most major festivals. So there's opportunity for them to see your movie, to like your movie, to make an acquisitions offer. You'll also get industry connections. It'll generate organic word-of-mouth marketing. There'll be press opportunities. You can network with other individuals in the film industry, right? You can build up those festival laurels, and so that makes it easier for us to pitch to platforms for licensing deals, right? When we can point to a movie and say, okay, it won the audience award at Fantasia, right? Like that's a really key selling point that will play up in our pitches. And then you'll also be able to reach local audiences, and then reach your target audience potentially, especially if you're doing like niche festivals that are maybe women focused or LGBTQ plus focused, or specifically for people of color, right? Those are really great to attend. And then you also get to participate in panels and workshops like this. So these are the biggest festivals and markets. This is for Q1 and Q2. January, you'll have Sundance, February, Berlin, March, South by Southwest, April, Tribeca, and May, June-ish, Cannes. And there's obviously so many other film festivals and film markets, but these are just the major ones, right? September, you'll have Toronto, Telluride, Venice, and then American Film Market in November. So there's various types of premieres. So when you're filling out your film festival submissions, you can directly refer to this and know exactly what box to press, right? So you have your world premiere. This is for first time. This is the first time your film is shown for the general public. International, first time your film is shown outside of your home country. Continental, first time your film is shown on a continent. National, first time your film is shown in a country. Domestic, first time your film is shown in your own country. And then regional, first time your film is shown in a city. So getting accepted into all of the top film festivals is not a viable distribution plan. I know a lot of filmmakers, when I ask them, what's your distribution plan? They'll be like, I'm going to Sundance. This is it, right? And I love that enthusiasm, but the acceptance rates of the Sundances of the world are really, really low, right? You'll get into some festivals, right? But it's the goal, you want to have a backup plan just in the case that you do get into film festivals and there's no distribution or acquisitions offers, right? And that's a reality. Even some films that are in Sundance don't get distributors attached. So you have to have a backup plan, whether that be through self-distribution or reaching out strategically to distributors that you want to work with in order to get that distribution. Yeah.
Sundance only accepts 1.3%.
Yeah, I know. I did the math. I wrote this for my thesis, actually. I did the math. It was scarily low. I'm trying to think what it was like 1/40th of the acceptance rate as Harvard, right? It's really, really low.
Don't some distributors have sway also? Do they have?
Yeah, exactly, right. So a lot of distributors will obviously have connections with the people orchestrating the festival, so they can pull in some favors and get their films in. So as a truly independent filmmaker, it's really challenging. This is why I got interested in this space. I'm like, how do you make money as an independent filmmaker, right? It's challenging. But there's a lot of great other festivals out there, right? Even if you have your sights set on, these top film festivals, you can get so much good press, so many good connections through all of these mid-tier festivals as well. So don't discount them. Some recommendations: attend festivals, volunteer at a film festival. Don't ignore local film festivals, right? You can ask for waivers too if you're strapped for cash. And then consider asking for screening fees for bigger festivals or more niche festivals like these. And then apply to those festivals that can provide you what you need and want. I think a lot of filmmakers just apply to a lot of film festivals. They kind of do the spray and pray approach. Be selective about what you're applying to. Those submission fees can really rack up quickly. And you don't want to be digging into your pocket if you haven't even set aside that budget, right, early on in your production budget. And then if your film is accepted, go into the film festival with a plan. So set up meetings and hire a festival publicist. You can hire them ahead of time to generate some press around it, press around the release, the film festival, so it feels bigger than it actually is. Getting into marketing, so these are going to be your 3 most important assets. You have your trailer. This is the first thing we see when we're looking at films that we would like to acquire. So try to keep it under 1 minute 30 seconds, generally under 2 minutes, or else you risk losing the attention of your audience. Your key art is going to be really important. This is going to sell your movie and grab people's attention. One thing I would like to mention, I mentioned this yesterday, but while key art is really important, don't spend too much money on it just before you have a distributor, just because sometimes distributors will want to completely redo the key art to match their brand and what they've seen work. And then you have a 30-second teaser. This is something that we've seen work really well. We will do a little bit of paid ad spend on these teasers on social media. They grab people's attention. They're cut downs, kind of short teasers, and they'll usually, receive the highest engagement on social media. We've been doing a lot of TikTok videos like that lately. All right, so for your key art, you consider creating and submitting 2 versions of the posters. Some platforms may choose one over the other. Also, having a second one, if you want to do a refresh maybe in a year, it's on a platform and it's feeling a little stale, you can always just refresh the art to make it feel new. When consumers look at the poster, they should know the genre and tone of the film, right? You can look at these and kind of get a general sense of it. Does your poster pop? Does it capture the attention of your target audience? And then fun fact, we've seen on a few number of our platforms, we've seen that posters with 2 people usually perform the best. So even if you have 3 A-listers, it makes more sense to put 2 people on there. Setting your film up for success. So create social media pages in your website. So establish that direct connection with your target audience via these digital hubs earlier on, right? Like early, even during the production of it, start building that fan base. Get that excitement. Create a newsletter, so that when you're ready to release, you have those people that are craving your content and are ready to transact. Build a social media calendar. So create a calendar for what assets you'll be posting and when. And then kind of ramp things up the closer and closer you get to your release date. Hire a publicist. So for small indies, publicity should be condensed into 4 weeks prior to the release. You should start thinking about it about 2 or 3 months before the release. That's when you should consider bringing one on, if you haven't brought one on for film festivals. It's never too early to begin brainstorming ideas for marketing campaigns during pre-production. Press kit, you can build a press kit out and highlight existing publicity, incorporate production stills, and hone in on your project's key selling points. This is really helpful for us as a distributor. If a filmmaker generates a press kit, gives it to us, that helps us know how to market your film. We can grab some stills from there, and we know exactly where the film has gotten press for. We can highlight that. And then create social assets. So this can include anything from film clips, GIFs, teasers, quote cards. Like if you get a review from maybe a notable person, you can put that on a quote card. That can be a social media asset that you market. Character cards, countdown cards, like 1 week until release, 3 days until release, that thing. Behind the scenes footage also works well. Generally, one other note with that is video assets usually work really well because it's just attention grabbing, especially on social media. So regarding reviews and quotes, so use quotes religiously. Good quotes can help make a film feel bigger and more credible. The most visible asset in Moonlight's marketing campaign was its use of stellar quotes and reviews. And you can see that the quotes are used everywhere over here, right? And especially from critical voices. You definitely, if you get a stellar review from a notable film critic, you definitely want to play that up. It's a really good marketing asset. put it on the key art, create quote cards, put that on social media. And then once you have your release, you want to encourage your friends to give positive reviews, but keep it realistic, right? On IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, and Amazon. And then regarding contact lists and partnerships, kind of alluded to this before, but you really want to begin generating your contact list early on. So did you do a Kickstarter? You'll have those emails. Did it play in any festivals, even small ones? Identify organizations that are relevant to your niche audience that might be a good partner. Did you work with a brand, right? Yeah, we have one film right now that it's incredible. They cycled from Alaska to the tip of South America. It took them 2 years. Incredible. And they worked with some pretty notable brands, their bikes, right? That's such good marketing for the bikes. So we're really leaning into that to play up that brand partnership so that they can promote on their end. And then identify influencers who your target audience follows or watches, because their audience, their followers are going to be the same ones that are interested in your movie. And then they can also post and encourage their followers who they've built this loyal, trusting relationship with to go watch your film, right? Partner with a nonprofit or influencers for the release. Like I mentioned before, you can consider donating a portion of proceeds for a window of time to a nonprofit in exchange for several promotional posts, maybe 3 social media posts, and an email blast to their subscribers. Or you could also do an event with a nonprofit, right? If they wanted to set up a screening and do a screening or 2 together. Can you go back for a second? And then, are there any opportunities? Yeah, for event-like screenings, churches. Yeah, we saw this before. It worked really well before the pandemic, but for faith-based films, doing non-theatrical event-like screenings at churches worked really well, because that's the target audience, right? That's it for me. Here's my email. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or I can send this slide deck to you as well. But thank you so much for listening, and we can get into questions. Yes.
Do you work with agencies that help with funding for product placement in your
No, we don't. That's typically something that producers will do earlier on, right? It can be a source to utilize in the budget itself. Brand partnerships, that is. Yeah.
So I have a Wahlestedt sci-fi short.
Love it. I'm already hooked. I love sci-fi.
But I'm curious, so right now I have it, it's meant to be a proof of concept for a series that I'd like to pitch. But I'm curious what your thoughts might be, whether pitching it as a series or developing it into what would be a feature would be more marketable.
Yeah, it really depends. We acquire both films and series. I mean, it's really a question of what works better for the story, right? Because like 2 hours is very different than a series, right? It really depends on what works best for the story. That being said, I mean, we've had the same dilemma with filmmakers. They're like, okay, I have this proof of concept. What do I do with it? Do I make it into a film? Do I make it into a series? And we will typically take it out to our platforms that we work with, like the streaming platforms, give them the proof of concept, but just mention that, there's flexibility here. Like, we can make it a series, we can make it a film. What are you looking for? What are you seeing work best with your audiences? So it's kind of a conversation of what works best for them to make a co-production work. Yeah.
Good question. Great presentation. Good question. You were saying before it's best like with IMDb and these sort of display sites for marketing your film to not place dates, completion, budgets, things like this in progress. Doesn't that counter having a Kickstarter up? Because a Kickstarter you have to look how much you need.
Yeah.
You don't acquire that, you kind of show your card, your hand, and you don't want to. So how would that work when it comes to like these
types of fundraising sites? Like, is that really beneficial for promoting longer?
Yeah, the question is about, so if you're doing a Kickstarter, obviously you can see the completion date and or the funding date, the completion date, and the amount, right? And then with IMDb, right, with sales agents, my answer to the question is with sales agents, they quickly just look to IMDb, honestly. It's quick, right? That's their one source. They'll look to it. They'll be able to see, okay, when was this released, right? It's not a thorough deep dive process of, okay, how much is this film made for? I'm gonna look into the deep web to figure out how much was the Kickstarter. So, I mean, with our the international sales agents we work with, they just look to IMDb. Sorry, I always say IMDb TV because it's a platform we work with. Yeah.
So with Kickstarter, you're saying it kind of depends on if you're maybe just trying to acquire proof of concept, budget,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of financing the whole thing, that's not the best route.
No, I mean, I've seen films financed totally on Kickstarter. Yeah, there's a ton out there. Seed and Spark is a great one. Kickstarter obviously is great. I've seen it work. It's harder to do, right? For that, it's really the marketing. If you have really incredible marketing, yeah, I mean, it depends how much you're raising, right? Is it a micro budget film? It's easier to do via Kickstarter versus if you're trying to go for larger budget, right? You're going to have to get equity partners on board, maybe debt financiers, things like that, tax credits. It really depends on your movie. But I mean, like I mentioned, like we've seen great films made with $50K, right? I mean, obviously you have to pull in a lot of favors, but some have incredibly high production value too. And the more you keep your budget low, the higher chance you can recoup the budget and then make some on top of that. So you have to be strategic about the economics there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mine's a very similar question to the other woman's question about, I have a concept as well, and I originally wanted to make it a feature film, but upon writing it and really getting into the development, I realized I kind of want to make it into a miniseries, but I've only seen really the success of miniseries so far on Netflix, and I've seen them as kind of a new concept. So how are those, not new, I know they're not new, but like I've seen, the more successful ones have been relatively in the last like 2 to 3, roughly 4 years. So how have those been reacting to like distributors and markets? Is that something that's still kind of experimental? Because I've really only seen them with Netflix.
Yeah, miniseries. I mean, we'll pick up series. We'll do the typical like TVOD release. SVOD licensing deals, not so much, but it does well in AVOD too. It really depends on what your goals are. Yeah, I mean, you can go either way with it. Again, it's like what works best for the story. I would try avoiding putting it on YouTube or anything like that, monetizing it, right? Because then you're taking away that first premiere, that first release. Yeah, we're not doing a lot of miniseries, nor do we pitch that many miniseries. But it's still, I mean, there's still a path to distribution and a path and valid revenue streams for those, right? We've seen some work really well on Tubi, for example, because with that, right, you're paying for the amount of time, right? They'll put in an ad every 15 to 20 minutes. So the longer it is, right, the more you might be able to get on that. Obviously, there's different episodes, so you might lose people along the way. We've seen like episode 1 might have a lot of viewers, and episode 2 is starting to go down a little bit, right? But overall, you're having more content, more content for people to watch. So you can lean into that. Yeah.
In regards to miniseries, do the streamers typically pay more for the miniseries than like a feature or an actual series?
It depends. Like, it depends on how valuable they see it, right? They'll typically pay per episode, per hour. So it really depends based on who's attached, the IP, the key selling points.
Well, say for the distribution, what if you want to do it streaming and then maybe take it to network or some other platform after that? What's the window, how long do the streaming channels normally actually want that?
Yeah, our terms are usually, can be anywhere from a year to like 4 years usually, is what we've generally seen. Yeah.
I know the answer, but can you mention the list of deliverables?
Yeah, oh my gosh.
There is so many issues with the first-time filmmakers, especially with M&E track and all that. So it'll be good to make at least give them a brief, like you need to have at least this much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our delivery schedule has like 60 items, so we'd be here for a while talking about it. Yeah. Yeah, no, the high level ones are obviously you need your technical deliverables. That's your feature, your sound files, your captions. You cannot distribute in the US without captions. So build that into your budget. That's something that filmmakers we're always having to create for them or alert them. Trying to think what other technical deliverables. No. Yeah, we don't do that. I mean, it's the feature, right? The files, the main feature files for technical. Now, for legal deliverables, we require E&O insurance. So you would work with a third-party insurance broker to get E&O insurance. That can typically range. It depends on your limits, right, and your terms. So we're only asking for $1 million for single occurrence and $3 million in aggregate. Sometimes we'll lower that to $1 million for a year, and that's the lowest you can get, right? That's the lowest, most basic E&O insurance, and that's typically going to cost $1,500 just for the premium, right? And the copyrights. So one thing you'll want to do, and what we ask for, is you'll want to register your film with the U.S. Copyright Office, your screenplay, right? But also we require the motion picture itself. So both, right? If you have a documentary, obviously it's just the motion picture itself. We ask for title report. We ask for talent agreements, right? Make sure that's all buttoned up. That there's work for hire language in there. And if there's any name and likeness requirements in the talent agreements, we like to have a separate document saying, okay, this person has to be in all the posters and has to be 2 times bigger than this person. Like, there's certain legal things that are in the contract that we need to know as a distributor before we're making key art, for example. Or this person has to be credited first, right? And chain of title, thank you for mentioning that. Chain of title is probably the biggest one, right? We need to see exactly where the rights are. Are you the licensor? Can we buy the film from you? That's essentially what we're checking for. The chain of title can be made up of a variety of things. One is the copyrights, right, with the U.S. Copyright Office. The second being a purchase or option agreement or a writer's agreement, indicating that the production company hired a writer. And then if you do hire a writer, you'll also need an assignment. So, okay, as a production company, I hired this person to write this. The assignment will say, these rights have now been assigned to this production entity. So one thing you'll want to do if you're doing a film, right, is create an LLC or a legal entity for your film. So you can put all the rights into that, so you're not holding that, and you will not personally be liable in case somebody sues you. Make sure it's all in a production company, or better yet, an entity, like an entity for the film. We do 4K. That's usually our post-production team. That's one nice thing. We have a post-production house, so we have a team dedicated towards the whole delivery process on the technical end, but I believe they asked for 4K. I think that's it. I know there's a ton of other deliverables that are optional on there. We try to just streamline everything and ask for the bare minimum just because it's so laborious to gather all of these details, right? Yeah.
Good question about a film potentially that has multiple languages. Say, how would the captions work for that for deliverable? So, say if you have like 3 separate languages, each one of those 3 languages would have to essentially 9 captions between themselves, right? For each one, like, is that how that would work?
Yeah. So you would need you would need English captions, right? If it's 3 languages for the translations as well. I mean, and if you're creating like I'm sure you probably want to do all the 3 languages, right? Because I don't know, but whatever you want to do, right? You're gonna have to need different files. Yeah. So to be able to distribute to English-speaking territories, you would need the English subtitles all throughout. If you want to do Spanish subtitles, you would need that too, right? It'd be a separate file for each. Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah, it can definitely, and certain territories charge a lot more. Like in Japan, it's a lot more expensive to get subtitles just because there are fewer translators. But in Spanish, it's cheaper, right?
Yeah, totally. And I saw like there was a Alejandro González-Iñárritu film that came out before Birdman called Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie sort of dealt with southern Spain with multiple languages and how, you know, sort of the cultures interact. And they had different colors for each of the different languages that were going in English. So is that like one way to kind of go about it?
With the use of colors?
For deliverables, yes. Like,
I don't think we have different colors.
No?
We have so we work with people to generate this. We only do English subtitles, really. We've explored it with a few of them. Obviously, if it has a target audience that is like Hispanic, right? We're gonna want to create Spanish subtitles for that, and make sure they're on the right platforms where those viewers will be congregating. So it really depends on the film. If you can tell, that's the answer to all my questions. It depends on your film. Every film is really different, though. Like your distribution plan is gonna change so much depending on who your audience is, what your goals are. So everything is customized. You really have to think through, okay, who are the right partners to bring on board for this? Do I want to do self-distribution? Is this even right for theatrical? I know a lot of filmmakers want to do theatrical, but sometimes it's not right for the film. And you'll just be throwing away money, right? So it really depends. Yes?
you mentioned Amazon is like kind of 1 cent revenue compared to Tubi.
Mm-hmm.
But Amazon has like 100 plus countries, right? So how do you, when it comes to revenue, the Tubi probably, Tubi is like a few countries?
Tubi is growing a lot recently. They're really scaling up. So I don't know exactly how many countries they have. Yeah, Amazon definitely has more reach, but they're paying out so low that it makes sense even if you have fewer viewers on Tubi. I mean, just you're making so much more from that. At least that's what we've seen. For some of our highest earning titles or highest, our best performing titles on Tubi, we've seen impression counts of like 5 million. You know, there's an incredible amount of people that are on Tubi, whether you use it or not. You know, so there's a clear audience on there for it. Yes.
I wrote a script to feature in one year Channel International Film Festival in 2017. And since then, I have a publishing company that wants to write a book, and they claim that we can sell about 100 to 200,000 books. What's your experience with something like that?
So you wrote a script and a publishing house wants to make books, is that right? Write a book based off of the script. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, nice. All right. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it usually happens the other way around, right? Where a film or a script is based off of some existing IP, like a book, for example. We love seeing that as a distributor because we know, well, it depends on if the book was sold a lot, but we know that there's an audience for it already, right? With the other way around, I mean, like, the more reach you can get, the more eyeballs you can get on your story, the better. And you can really capitalize on that momentum, right? So it's really comes down to, is this a good marketing opportunity? Can you increase the number of your target audience that might be interested in this? And then from those book sales, can you convert them into, when you actually make the movie, can you convert them into paying customers for the movie itself? Yeah. Since they did what?
Start, right? Seed and Park you mentioned.
Sorry?
Seed and
The
Spark.
title of
Oh, how much are they what?
Kickstarter. You mentioned they raised the budget on Kickstarter.
I don't know if I said that. Kickstarter, Seed and Spark are both really good Kickstarter platforms to use if you want to raise. I don't know how much Seed and Spark is really filmmaker friendly. They'll work with you. They're really great. It's a really great team. They'll work with you to help fundraise, to give you tips on how to market your fundraising campaign and whatnot. So I would look into those two platforms if you're trying to get some crowdfunding money. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Thank you guys.